Okay, welcome divas and dudes to our nutrition class. I'm so excited to have you. This is my final series, or final class in the series of looking at the anti-cancer way of life. I'm sure going to still talk about how to avoid cancer in this beautiful life, but as you may know, I've been sort of looking at the book that really launched the world into a whole new focus on how to research the anti-cancer components of wellness. And so, I just felt like we need to keep looking back on that. And if you haven't already read the book by Dr. Shriver, this is pictured down there. He did finally pass away from cancer, but he spent 13 years of his life really researching, and he spoke all over the world. He wrote this book that has, I think, 9 different editions, so updating information. And so that's what I really love to focus on, is we need to stay abreast of the information, and we need to keep looking at what's happening with the nutrition research. Did you have a question?
What's the name of his book?
Anti-Cancer Way of Life.
Okay.
So if you look that up, you can buy one on Amazon for a couple of bucks. I mean, they're really neat. So today what I want to focus on is green tea. And you'll find that green tea is the same as all the other teas. So really there's 2 teas. There's herbal and there's Camellia sinensis. And it's so fun. I get to show you how the processing of this tea will change the qualities just in numerous ways. And it becomes a wonderful science. Also, what you're going to find is the chemicals in tea are really one of the just spearheaded chemicals of research around the anti-cancer way of life, and that is our polyphenols. So there's going to be a lot of fun words that we toss around. Think of them as antioxidants, and I'll describe them in a little bit more detail, but the polyphenols, as a part of the anti-cancer way of life, is the focus around this beautiful beverage of tea. And again, in his early research in the 2000s is when a lot of the research just took off in learning about tea and polyphenols and antioxidants and trying to understand what their effect is in the body. So I feel like that's the exciting part. And so what we were finding is that the anti-cancer potential of the polyphenols is far-reaching in the human body. We find that it lowers blood sugar, it increases insulin sensitivity, it decreases cancer risk, it increases heart health, it decreases inflammation, it even boosts brain function. Doesn't that sound like a perfect thing that we all want to know about? Give me some of that, right? And so it's the job of the research to really understand the nuts and bolts of what we see. Seems to be the case when we look at anecdotal or studies that look at people groups. And so, we always want to narrow it down and be really clear that in science, is the information that we're sharing repeatable? So can we get the same result over and over and have confidence in the outcome? So here is this beautiful tea, and I've brought a little bit of this tonight or today because it's not like your average tea. And that's what I really want you to think of as a take-home. I want you to, if you like tea or you think you might like tea, I want you to dive in and experiment with Camellia sinensis. Nothing like your typical tea where it comes in a little tea bag and you open it up and it's this little powdered stuff that leaves sometimes a residue in your cup, and it's just this. It's a totally different experience, which is why we can easily get different outcomes in studies. Because if we don't narrow it down to exactly what are we studying, what tools are we using to study it, and who are we studying it on, we'll get confusing information. So the polyphenols are catechins, which are the powerful antioxidants that inhibit the proliferation of fast-growing cells, which is the smoking gun of what we want If we never want to see a cancer cell get even a moment of life in our body, we want it to be immediately scavenged by those anti-cancer molecules. And so what are they exactly? They're water-soluble organic compounds that protect against the oxidative damage and the stress factors that cause tissue breakdown. So, it's kind of hard for us to be on a level of, yes, we like food, yes, we like tea, and understanding what's happening at the cellular level in our bodies when we have these certain chemicals. And so we kind of have to put our science brain, our science hat on, and make our brains really think about what's happening at the cellular level. And so if we think of an antioxidant, that's something that's stopping oxidation, which is a breakdown. And we think, well, that seems odd. We breathe oxygen. Why is oxidation bad? And part of life is that we every day are a little bit older. We are, in fact, every day breaking down because we are breathing and we are in sunlight. I know, huh, Rachel? Can't live forever yet. There's no well of life that will allow us to always stay 17, right? Or 18, pick your favorite age. So oxidation is in fact happening to us now, but how do we minimize it, especially on those radical cells that are doing a lot more havoc than what we allow our genetics to play out in our, hopefully 80 years of wellness. Just like Jack LaLanne, he lived this amazing life, super healthy, and then died. That's what we all want, right? We don't want live amazing life, we turn 20 and we have problems, and then we have a few more problems, and we have diabetes, and then we have osteoporosis, and we have all these things that degrade our quality of life throughout 20, 30, 40 years. That's exactly what we don't want. So understanding how the food and the environment affect that really becomes exciting, I think. So brewed tea is actually the most common drink in the world next to water. I was really surprised at that, right? But it makes you think. For starters, the US is a very small drop of the total population, and all over the world, tea is so accessible, and it's truly a part of the human experience because tea has been around for so long. Super cool. And note that in the polyphenols, and you'll understand this quickly when I start rattling off some crazy terms, but there's 8,000 different types of these chemicals that the good Lord put in our Mother Earth to help us age gracefully. So I love the fact that our plants and our plant kingdom that supports all life has these wonderful components or molecules that help us stay as healthy as we can. So when we think of inhibiting tumor growth, inducing apoptosis, what is that funky word? That means stopping a cell that's growing that shouldn't be. So turning off a cell that's growing out of the ordinary. We want our body to be able to identify that and stop it right away, right? So not only does it inhibit the growth of these funky cells, it also, if it does happen to start growing, now these different polyphenols can stop it. Interferes with progression of the tumor development. So if you followed, cancer and the etiology around that is, we have these different stages. It initiates, and then it perpetuates, and it grows, and then it multiplies. So all those stages, there's these different wonderful chemicals in nature that help to stop that process. Not to mention that green tea also is noted to be rich in vitamins and minerals. And really, that should not shock you. Why? Well, because it's a leafy green, right? Oh yeah, it's a leafy green. And of course, part of my study in all this was, hey, well, how does coffee fit into this? Because I don't know about you, but coffee is my favorite. I do love tea, but got to start the day with a good cup of coffee. And lo and behold, coffee is from a bean, just like tea is from a leafy green, and it shouldn't surprise you that they are loaded with nutrients. And so creating a food or a beverage from these leafy greens and beans will have a big impact on the benefits that we get from our body. So that's again where I'd love for us to learn and really kind of delve into some of the practices around steeping, brewing, roasting, grinding, and all those processes that go into one of our favorite beverages, whether it be tea or coffee. So riboflavin, niacin, folic acid, I just love that all those are in a cup of tea. Now you might say, well, how much tea do I need to drink to get these benefits, right? And it does vary, again, how strong you make it. But let's just say anywhere between 3 and 5 cups of tea is a good goal to shoot for. And then you say, well, what's a cup? Is it my little Gaiwan cup? So again, a lot of subjectiveness. So I wouldn't even worry so much about the how much. I would instead enjoy the variety and the aromas and just kind of get into it as a new hobby. It doesn't have to be something that replaces your favorite beverage in the morning. But I won't lie, if it ends up replacing your favorite soda, I would applaud that with flying colors, right? Because then we think of the sodas and the drinks of the US. Instead of having all these wonderful natural chemicals, now we've got some man-made chemicals. And then we start having health detractors rather than health improvers. So a really big component of this whole idea around anti-cancer is what should we include and what should we take out of our style of living.
And you're talking about only green tea.
I'm not, and that's the thing. So I alluded to it, and you're going to see that it's one plant. One plant makes all of the teas except herbals. So the Camellia sinensis is one plant, and it's processed in different ways that make black tea, oolong tea, dark tea or pu'er, and of course the green tea from one plant. So cool. So let me just give you a little bit of background. Again, Dr. David's research, early 2000s, and it really catapulted from a few studies. And he started digging into the research and said, I want to know more. So early on, it was small studies. And you guys are all experts in the field of research, because I know I've probably told it to you more than once, but we want a large sample size. Is 143 smokers enough? Probably not. But it started to look promising. Black and green tea consumption on oxidative damage to DNA showed positive results, showed increased levels of these polyphenols we call catechins in the blood and also in the urine. So at least we're knowing that it's getting into the body. The next step we'll see, well, what exactly is it doing at the cellular level? So again, lots to learn, but it was promising that these smokers saw some improvements in their incidence of cancer, incidence of heart disease. 2001, another study on skin cancer patients. Again, the black and green tea consumption was paralleled with reduced size and proliferation of these tumors. So the more tea, the less we saw of cancer proliferation. And so, think, okay, we got to learn more about this. It looks promising, but. So then forward a few years, 2009, an update, a couple of researchers looked at a whole cohort, which means they gather lots of data that looked at people that drank tea and what was their lifestyle like. Remember last week I talked a little bit about the CP3 study, which is going on right now, and I'm so excited about because we're smarter about how to gather information. We're learning how to do a repeatable study so that, 47 years in the future, we can look back and go, those people did a good job on that study design. But here, looking at this review of 1.6 million participants, is that a big number? For sure. Showed mixed reviews. We looked at GI cancers, breast, prostate, lung, ovarian, bladder, and the results were very confusing. Couldn't really get any valuable data. There were little pockets of yes, promises of nothing, promises of, that didn't look good. And so study design, even when we were looking at cohorts, which again means that, hundreds of different researchers set up their own research and had their own body of data that they were looking at. And then the few researchers in the future said, hey, can I look at your data and, splice it up and do some statistical analysis on it? And they just couldn't get good info. And so there started to be some question, well, do we really want to recommend drinking tea as part of the health benefits of everyday life? And that's where, you still see some doctors going, eat whatever you want, doesn't matter. Now, I don't think there's too many that say go ahead and smoke, right? My mom had me in her tummy and the doctor said, yeah, you can go ahead and smoke a bit. Just don't inhale. No, I'm kidding. I think they probably said, yeah, whatever, and it just shocks me that wasn't that long ago, 50-ish years. And, now we're so clear that no, don't smoke at all. So now the molecular nutrition and food research was a pretty cool research tool that I used. And better research is definitely coming. The polyphenols in foods that prevent inflammation by altering the intestinal microbiota. So it goes hand in hand. As we started learning more about the gut and this whole amazing organ that seems to have such an amazing role in our wellness, in our ability to fight off disease, not to mention our digestion and absorption of vitamins and minerals, it all depends on our gut. And so that research really paralleled some of the better research looking at the foods we eat and the polyphenols that occur. So healthy gut biome creates important metabolites from tryptophan. Now, I don't expect you to remember tryptophan, but does that ring a bell? Yes? Yeah, it's an amino acid. Yeah, and yeah, it kind of has a reputation of making you sleepy, and that's because it has a direct pathway to serotonin, which is a brain chemistry, a brain chemical that helps your brain feel relaxed. Everything's chill. And so after the big turkey dinner, we all think that it's the turkey that had the tryptophan that made us go take a nap, but we know better. What is it really? Yes. Yes. High blood sugar, the insulin is in there working on all the mashed potatoes. The turkey is probably not guilty at all. But nonetheless, that's how it got its name. So let's dig in a little bit to this beautiful tea. And as you got to kind of smell my beautiful Camellia sinensis, I really wanted you to know that there's not too many places in the Western continent that grows this. It comes from very high altitude, very specific volcanic soil. And it's in deep tradition. So if anything's going to bring China closer to the US, I think it will be a love of tea for both countries, because they are so incredibly proud of their tea heritage. If only we were to appreciate it more, I think they would, appreciate us more. But this was a picture that I really wanted you to see, because this is where it's grown. Now you will see teas that talk about, let's see if I have one on my table. Like this one. It talks about being organics, golden oolong tea, or this one that is green tea with jasmine. Now I just mentioned the true tea should not have anything else added. So it shouldn't have to have jasmine added to have an amazing floral aroma. And what happens is the US knows that the consumer, us, we have very little knowledge about what good tea is, so we can be fed trash and not even know it. Sorry, Lipton, but you fall in that category. Even, Vinnie's and whatever these other ones are. Because we just don't have a palate for it. What is our palate trained to love? High fat, high sugar, high salt, high crunch, right? And the other cultures around this style aren't nearly as easy to please. They haven't been in contact with what we call food cocaine nearly as much. And so they have been raised on the nuances of aroma and, of course, flavors. And I'm telling you, it took me a while to make these teas and really learn how to appreciate the smells and the flavors. Because at first, it's not bold enough because I'm used to coffee. But when you start thinking about it. So another beverage is similar to this. Wine, beer, and of course coffee. They all have their own vernacular to help you learn to appreciate them. And so if you ever are at a dinner party with a wine connoisseur and he starts talking about all the descriptions, you feel like, gosh, I didn't notice that it had cigar and oat and cherry. I just thought it was red, right? And then if you're fed the idea, pardon that pun, then you go, oh yeah, I could sort of tell it had a touch of apricot and a little bit of cedar. You know, if you are taught to think about those flavors and aromas, you kind of find them, right? So I feel like they really are there. We just ignore them if we're not looking for them. So I love the fact that this culture has so much to do with the beauty of the process. So in that one tea leaf, we get green tea, we get white tea, yellow, oolong, black tea, and dark tea. So again, all come from the same tea leaf, the Camellia sinensis. And so I just think it's so exciting. Now, the processing to get to these different ones will change how much polyphenols are there. It'll change the aroma from being fruity to grassy to almost like steamed rice, sometimes pear. And so we're going to play with those a little bit today. So I want you to be able to just get an idea of what we're experimenting with. It's so beautiful. On the very dark tea, on the very end there, pu'er is a tea that is fermented. So in the normal process, the tea leaves are picked and they are withered, which just means they're dried in the sun, and then they're rolled. And some of the bruising that happens to the tea leaves is what opens up the polyphenols. So the plant phytochemical is activated. It's its way of protecting itself, making those plant polyphenols. And after that stage, if they wanted to take it to a next level, they would put it into some cloths and steam it. And then at a certain temperature, certain bacteria grow. Is this sounding familiar? Like prebiotics and even probiotics when the actual bugs are there. So the fermented tea is used as a probiotic. So here's a picture of this beautiful plant. So the one plant that creates all the teas, and it really is all about the theoflavins. So again, these are just fancy terms. Write them down so you can throw them out when you're talking at your next luncheon or dinner party. Make sure you have your theoflavins today. But the polyphenols are going to vary based on the pigments that are cultured in that tea leaf, light versus dark. It also creates the catechins and theorubicins, again, fancy terms. And really what I want you to take away is that there's such a science around this. It's really fun to understand that at each stage of the curing of the tea leaves, new polyphenols are coming up, and you can notice by the aroma changes and of course the color changes, because the pigment in the leaf is related to how much polyphenols are there and what type are there. So drying, withering, rolling, heating, steaming yield many of those special properties. And I will share the link if you want of this young guy on YouTube. He's got to be, I'm telling you, maybe early 20s. And college student studying biochemistry, was so enamored by this that he packed up and moved to China and lives with locals and has absolutely turned this into a science. And now he's started a tea company. And I just love that. I mean, at 25, and so learned Chinese and now is really understanding all the nuances of this beautiful science. So tea is sacred, as I'd mentioned, and you can see the lady here on the side. That's how they dry the leaves. They're on a very clean mat, and it's depending, of course, on how much sun, how much moisture in the air. I mean, all the little details. So take a look at this picture. I think this gives us a good idea of how different the tea leaves are. And so just kind of like if you pre-chop all your vegetables and then you dry them and then you put them in a little bag and you let them sit on the shelf for, yeah, you're getting my idea. And you let them sit on the shelf for who knows how long, doesn't even have a best by date on it, right? Do you think that all those aromatics and delicate antioxidants are going to be as strong as they are versus if they were in a leaf that was larger and was processed a little differently. Yeah, for sure. So not only do you lose a lot of the flavors, but you also lose a lot of the important polyphenols, which again leads to probably why there's such different data in the research, because it's so hard to get apples comparing to apples. So the West has yet to embrace the beauty of all this. So I'm hoping I can really excite you. And I'll stop here just for a second because I do want to share this fabulous brand of tea. Rishi is the one that I used at Powers Bakery all the time. And they do sell all different types of green tea and black tea and oolong and pu'er, which is that fermented tea. You might even consider, if you want to try this, get a sampler bag, and you'll then get a couple of the pu'er, which is the dark one. It's very silky and rich, has amber colors, and then even ones that are familiar like Earl Grey. And you can compare a really high quality company to, you know, something that's a little more average, just to kind of see, okay, how does the level of change really happen when you start getting different kinds of tea? And notice too that I haven't really mentioned herbals. And I love herbal teas. I use them a lot. Herbals do not have nearly as much polyphenols. Now, it's still great hydration. I'm sure there's still going to be some vitamins and minerals still in it because it's a plant, but not nearly as much. This whole idea that Camellia sinensis leaf has amazing properties. So that withering step is really all about the drought stress, the aroma formation, enhancing savory and sweet flavors, and astringency. What do I mean by that word? Astringency. It feels rough in your mouth. If you've ever had a cup of tea and you didn't like it, that's because it had astringency. Wine also has that. If you open a bottle of red wine and it's not very good, or it's been sitting out for a while, the aromatics are gone and it has a bite to it. It's rough. That's astringency. So whether those are related to any antioxidants, it probably isn't, but for sure the flavor and the whole mouth feel is not enjoyable. So we don't like it. So we weed that out. And amazingly, even with the withering and going through the whole process of rolling and pressing the leaves, you lose a lot of the polyphenols, like 90%, but there's still so much left that it still has these great antioxidant powers. So the enzymes in the substrates, which just means that when the plant is broken down, it activates the enzymes, and now it can start to really change the whole quality of the leaf, depending on the nature. So again, the experts, and also being high in the mountain ranges, sets all the stage for getting a really good quality tea with those terpenoids. And again, if you make a good cup of tea and it has wonderful smell, now we know it's rich in those polyphenols. Here's another picture of these wonderful chemicals. So again, that young guy I was telling you about, the biochemistry major, he talked all through these chemical reactions. So just think of this as the oxidative mashing. So remember I said the antioxidants are what we want out of this beverage. And the mashing process activates it from the tea. So it's turning on the phytochemicals that were locked inside that plant, and now we get to benefit from it. Green tea, black tea, oolong, white tea, yellow tea, even the fermented. So 6 different teas come from that one plant, just depending on what process we put it through. So love it, love it. So the making of the tea really is about enzymatic reactions. So we're going to have the Maillard reaction. I don't know if do you remember that term? I talked about Maillard before because if we have acrylamide production, that's a bad chemical. It starts with browning, so the Maillard reaction is browning. But if you go too far, now it makes acrylamide, which is not good. So now put that in your mind and thinking of coffee. I alluded to this last time we were together, that coffee has acrylamide, and it made me nervous because my toast and coffee are now in jeopardy because both of those have that Maillard reaction, and it's not good for us. Now, the reality is, if we just don't go too dark, now we have the benefits of the polyphenols and not the acrylamide. So the sweet umami flavor. What do I mean by umami? Anybody remember that? The soy sauce flavor, the soy flavor, that's umami. It's kind of like a meat flavor. It's not really bitter. It's not really sweet or sour, because our palate has how many flavors that it can recognize? Sweet, bitter, sour, salty, and then that fifth one is umami, bitter. So when we have this really cool extra flavor, it's very pleasing. So our palate likes that, even if we don't have the vernacular to say, oh yeah, that's umami. We just don't think that way, but there's something about it that we like. So now we're going to hop over and look at, well, what other foods have these polyphenols? I mean, obviously we get it. Tea is important, but what else? And so I know this is a little bit hard to see, so I'll help you read it. But what we're looking at, oops, sorry. Go back to that. Fruits, veggies, seeds, spices like caraway and cinnamon, cloves and sage and curry, ginger, oregano, parsley, peppermint, red chicory, rosemary, anise, thyme, star anise, flax seeds, olive oil, beer, wine, coffee, teas that I mentioned, the black, the green, and the oolong. So polyphenols are everywhere. And I love the fact that we have to include all of these foods to get the benefits. You'll read a lot about chocolate, red wine, beer being these great sources of polyphenols. Sometimes that's marketing, right? Wants us to buy their special chocolate, or we want to have a justification for having our dark chocolate every day. Well, that's my source of polyphenols. And that's true. So how do we get the very best quality of the dark chocolate? Well, we want to make sure that it has very little additives, just like that tea. We don't want the tea to be anything but tea leaves. We don't want that chocolate to be anything but chocolate. And that makes it a little harder to enjoy, right, if it's not sweet. But the spices that I've always talked about are so valuable because it's a great way for us to see flavor in foods. Let me see if I can get back to just that. There we go. You see that better. Anytime we see seeds, flowering plants, bright colors, we know that polyphenols are there. Yeah. And so there over in the far corner, that's where I was mentioning because of the beer and the tea and the coffee. And so you feel like, gosh, why aren't we a healthier group of people? We do all these things, right? But what do you think happens between the Mother Nature with the right amount of sun and the right kind of soil and growing these things to the time it gets to our plate? What happens? A lot of hands get involved, right? It gets packaged and repackaged, right? And then it gets cooked some more and packaged some more, and then it sits on the shelf some more, and then it might get frozen and thawed and cooked again. Every stage of that processing takes down the polyphenols. So when we say eat more from the earth, it really means something. Yeah. Anybody ever try red chicory as a coffee replacement? It's a chicory coffee? No, I haven't. Yes? Good? Not good. That's very diplomatic. You don't have the palate for it. I haven't tried it yet either. But so when we think about all the other foods that are rich in nutrients, you don't have to love tea. But I think tea is really cool because it helps us see very little processing, especially when we get it close to the source and we can see the level of polyphenols that are available to us. But chocolate or cacao, somewhere between 70 and 85%. Of course, the green tea, you've got different varieties. But let's just suffice to say basic Camilla sinensis is the one you want. So if you're going to go on the web and buy some, look for that term, because that means it hasn't been flavor enhanced, it hasn't been cooked extra. It has to follow the very basic from the field processing, which is just the withering and the rolling and the steaming.
What was the term?
I'll spell it for you. It's going to come up in just a second. Let's see. So you can kind of look through here. I mean, the Cabernet Sauvignon, special types of plums, strawberries, and we've been told that strawberries are part of the dirty dozen. So does that mean we should avoid strawberries? No, we don't have to. Yes, getting organic on some of those is going to be really important, because again, that's a product that is right from the earth, just like blueberries and, watermelon. The least amount of hands touching it, the better. And so then we know that there's going to be a pure product. Something that's interesting too, when teas are grown in the US and they're under the organic label, they don't go through all these wonderful processes that are done in China. It's just they're mashed and pressed differently, so that it doesn't maintain and even cultivate all the nuances of the polyphenols that Chinese tea does. And yet it's called organic. So you're getting charged a very high amount for something that isn't nearly the same. And of course, in China, there are some organic farms, but it's kind of irrelevant. Instead, you want to look for the location of where it's being grown. I put this slide together because I really thought it was such a good point of, look at all the things that are involved in our wellness paradigm. So dabbling in tea could certainly add to our joy, because it's a little hobby and you can learn a whole new skill. But there's so many parts to, the ultimate phenomenon of wellness. We have diet, and of course it has to do with how much base foods are we using. Fruits and veggies for sure, fiber, and foods that are low in fat and rich in vitamins. Of course, sleep is a really important one. And so that little arm is talking about, if you're doing everything right and you have terrible sleep, your wellness paradigm is askew. And so we know that every little piece has an impact. Stress, super important. Of course, exercise and all the pieces to that. And I've talked a lot about exercise. That's something I feel so strongly about. And I feel like it's important for us to be okay with it changing through our lifespan. We don't need to do the same things that we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It needs to be fun, and it needs to be a component of social engagement and really finding something new and different. So if you haven't done a yoga class or a dance class, that might be something to explore. And know that strength training is a value, but it doesn't have to be in the traditional sense of lifting weights. It can still be moving your own body weight through space. And I feel like that's an important component. And so when we look at building our plate with a wide variety of colors, I think it's reassuring to know, even if you try my Camellia sinensis and you think, okay, that stuff is terrible, that's okay, because there's so many other foods that have polyphenols in it. And of course, so many varieties of tea. It's kind of like, if you don't like yogurt, don't give up. Just keep trying a different brand, because there's so many different types of yogurt, and there's so many different types of teas. I think I told you I kind of went down this experiment with my son, and he's become such a connoisseur. And so sometimes he'll bring me teas over and we'll have tea together. And sometimes the pu'er is a little too, I don't know, strong. And yet I love to experiment with it. It's become something that we share together. And so that's such a part of the culture in other Asian countries, both Japanese and Chinese. And that is that you sit around a cup of tea, just like I guess we might do with a cup of coffee or maybe a glass of wine. So I guess we got lots of options. So this one I was going to print for you, but this was a quote from the Dr. David book, and so I'll be sure to send it all to you. But he's basically saying that the flavonoids are by far his favorite polyphenols, and they're even in chocolate and red wine. This was kind of like as a second thought to the tea. and we delve into foods that are high, we want to take a look at, what they are good for. And knowing that plant chemicals are really where it all comes from, and helping our body fight off viruses and cell damage. I just think it's exciting to realize that plants have so much ability to help us be healthy and be the best we can. And knowing that preventing cancer is part of what we're discovering, and also helping with cancer treatment is another part of the exciting paradigm. I mentioned a little bit a couple weeks ago that flax is pairing up with different cancer treatments. Soy is pairing up with different cancer treatments, and that's specifically because of the polyphenols that are found in the soy plant. So it's pretty cool. And so, really, when I look at these beautiful colors, pigments come to mind. The beautiful, rich reds and purples are what we get from grapes. So if you want to imbibe on red wine, or instead get your polyphenols from plums and figs and grapes, you can still get some fantastic benefit from that. And I just thought this was a beautiful picture because, again, polyphenols help us see those beautiful colors. So the green tea doesn't have very much of the deep reds. The black tea and the fermented tea, on the farther down the line, has these reds. The green tea has the catechins and the theophyllenes, which again are part of that big group of the antioxidants. And so we get lots of different components, which again reminds us that it's so important to get a wide variety of colors in our diet, and getting benefit from cooked foods as well as raw foods straight from the field. And so, when we think about all of the polyphenols, berries, herbs and spices, cocoa powder, flax seeds, vegetables, olives, they're all going to be super rich. And getting each part of that gives us such a great option for anti-cancer. And so just to the last couple of slides, just as a reminder that, when we are studying these amazing plant chemicals, we're looking specifically at lifestyle diseases. So how can we avoid the propagation of these cells that are not healthy in our body? Oxidation that causes cancer, the type 2 diabetes. We know that something's happening with the pancreas and it's not able to make the right amount of insulin. And a lot of that is because the cells are struggling. Obesity, cardiovascular disease, and even neurological disorders. And so I thought I'd leave this slide and this one as just kind of the final for you to take notes on of if you haven't started adding cloves to your foods, I want you to. I've started adding star anise to my coffee. So I grind the beans and I put about 3 or 4 whole star anise cloves in the coffee grounds, and it's fabulous. One of the ladies from the cancer class that I teach on Thursday was having lots of leg pain, and she started chewing on the star anise, and she said she swears by it. She was better in 24 hours. Mind over matter, maybe, but I do believe that we Texans are not making nearly enough use of those beautiful seeds that are rich in aroma and pigments that help bring polyphenols into our body. So
you're saying
star anise, mm-hmm. and then anise. Yeah, so there are 2 different ones. Anise is a tiny little seed that's very aromatic, kind of a licorice, and star anise is similar, but it's a beautiful star shape. In fact, do I have that on one of my slides? I think I do. Yes, see that picture right there? That's the star anise. And so experimenting with teas, even though the Camellia sinensis is just the green tea, there's nothing that says you can't add other things to it. But I want you to get to do it, and not some manufacturer that says, this is green tea with jasmine. Green tea is supposed to already have an aroma of jasmine. But if it's old, they had to do something to make it better, And yet, if you get a really good quality black tea and you want to add some spices to it, now that I think is a great idea, because then you get to do your own creations, which is exactly what I did at Paris Bakery when I had cancer patients coming in and were feeling terrible. I would add fennel, I would add coriander. I would add these spices, which is exactly how the Ayurvedic teas came to be in Chinese medicine. So then we come full circle, and we realize that the Chinese medicine principles were around using all these special herbs with green tea to help people heal. And I didn't include this, but in Canada, green tea is the number one beverage that women use to help them heal during breast cancer. So somehow they got the idea, probably from Dr. David, that green tea is something that as soon as you're diagnosed, you need to drink copious amounts of green tea. And always is because, gosh, it's something we can do. We can feel like we've got an active role in our health and our treatment by taking in foods that we know are going to help heal our body from the inside out, helping our gut biome create those important metabolites from the tryptophan, and whatever it's doing in there, it's supposed to help me. So I'm just going to do it. And so finding the very best quality is what I hope to have helped you with a little bit today. So let's experiment with some tea. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.